John 15:17 has a good example of hina and why you need to understand the whole concept of semantic range. But Jesus is saying in his upper room discourse, he's saying these things, some stuff he's been talking about, these things I command to you. And just real quickly, who means dative? And again, why? Well, if you check the verb out, what you'll see is that entello means to give or leave instructions. And the idea is to give instructions to. A lot of times when verbs are not followed by the accusative, all you have to really do is think through what the word means, and you can see why it takes the dative or the genitive, perhaps. So, for example, entello means I give commands to, and if you go down in BDAG, you can see right here, tini ti, which means that what is given is in the accusative, and to whom it is given, tini, is going to be in the dative. So these things I command to you all is the idea. So I command these things to you all, hina, in order that you love one another. Now I wanted to focus on hina, so let's get BDAG up. And if you memorize even the glosses properly for hina, you know that it can mean purpose, or it can weaken to result, or it can weaken completely to the idea of that. In other words, the hina clause would be introducing the content of what has been commanded. And we move then into exegesis. But again, the point is that Greek gives you the range of possibilities, and then you use context to make the decision. If you haven't memorized the range for hina, you really need to. So hina can indicate purpose, right, in order that, okay. It can also, get down to B, or 2, it can mean that. In other words, it's just introducing the content, in this case, of what's commanded. And there's also a third basic use of hina that can indicate result. So is Jesus giving the command for the purpose of something? Is Jesus giving a command so there'll be a certain result? Or does John 15:17 indicate, in other words, what's the meaning of hina? Does this indicate the content of what is commanded? Is the command in order that they love, or is the command that they love? Well, that, of course, is the question of the passage. And as always, I just love going through different translations to see what the possibilities are. Check out the ESV, it's so that, so there's your purpose. If you pop down to the NASB, you get a little more generic that. And again, that's pretty ambiguous, isn't it? And that allows the following clause to be both the purpose or the content of the NASB, as is so often the case, is following the King James. So we have a that there. But when you get into most of the other translation, Holman Christian, they do something like a colon. This is what I command you, colon, love one another. In other words, they're making it clear that they understand the hina to mean content. And so if you go to the NIV, you'll see a colon. If you go to NLT, you'll see a colon. It's interesting to watch the shift from the RSV to the NRSV, and I really enjoy doing that. I enjoy seeing how the same committee upgrades its translations. In the RSV, it's, this I command you to love one another. That's doing the same thing as a colon, isn't it? But the NRSV changed their interpretation and went to purpose or result, so that you may love one another. Which one is it? Well, that's your decision, of course. I think most people are willing to look back up at verse 12 and say, this is my commandment. And here it clearly is, my commandment is this, that you love one another just as I loved you. So I think it probably, I would go with using verse 12 to interpret verse 17. and the hina is indicating the content of the command.